She took a job as a nanny and fell in love with a widowed billionaire. She just wanted a job to survive. But when she became a nanny for a widowed billionaire, she never expected to fall in love or discover he might be her father. Now, caught between a forbidden love, a child learning to smile again, and a secret buried for years, she'll have to make the hardest choice of her life. Before we continue, if you enjoy touching and inspiring stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Now, let's get back to the story. The first time Sophie knocked on the heavy oak door, her hand trembled. Just slightly, but enough for her to notice. She didn't know exactly why. Maybe it was the size of the mansion towering in front of her like something pulled out of a dream. Or maybe it was the way the air felt. Still, almost like the house itself was holding its breath. But more than anything, it was the feeling that this job, this one job, could change everything. It had to. Her fingers were still red from packing the night before, her backpack stuffed with all she owned, some worn clothes, a weathered notebook, and her mother's scarf. Sophie was 24, fresh out of a chaotic few years trying to piece her life back together after her mom passed. Since then, she'd been floating, moving, working, surviving. But she was tired of just surviving. This nanny position promised something different: stability, good pay, a place to stay, a chance to breathe. But there was something else tucked in the job description that had tugged at her heart. Widowed father seeking live-in caretaker for his 5-year-old daughter. Must be patient, warm, and understand loss. The door finally opened. A housekeeper in her late 50s with kind eyes and silver hair pulled into a tight bun smiled softly. "You must be Sophie." "Yes," she said, quickly brushing the loose strand of hair from her cheek. "Sorry if I'm early." "Not at all. Come in." The inside of the house was quiet, immaculate but cold. High ceilings, expensive furniture that looked untouched. Family portraits lined the hallway, though Sophie noticed one of them had been turned around facing the wall. She didn't ask. The housekeeper introduced herself as Maria and guided her through the house. "You'll meet Mr. Westbrook shortly. He's in a meeting right now." Sophie had seen his name on the application, Nathaniel Westbrook, but it hadn't clicked until she'd Googled it later. Billionaire tech investor, mysterious recluse. Lost his wife in a car accident 2 years ago. Since then, no interviews, no public appearances. Just vanished from the spotlight. And now she was about to work inside his house. Maria opened the door to the playroom. "This is where you'll be spending most of your time, and this—" A small girl stood by the window, her back to them. "That's Lily." The child turned slowly. She had a cascade of dark curls, big brown eyes, and a face that looked far too serious for someone so little. There was a doll in her hands, worn out, like it had been hugged too tightly for too long. "Hi, Lily," Sophie said gently, stepping closer. "I'm Sophie. I'm going to be your new friend." The girl didn't say anything, just looked at her. Then looked down. Maria whispered, "She hasn't spoken much since her mother passed, only to her father sometimes." Sophie's chest tightened. She crouched beside Lily, and, instead of asking anything more, she just sat quietly on the floor. After a moment, she pulled a small pink eraser from her bag, shaped like a bunny, and set it on the rug between them. "My favorite lucky charm," she said, not expecting a reaction. To her surprise, Lily picked it up, looked at it, then placed it gently next to her doll. That was enough. Later that evening, after Lily had gone to her room and Maria had brought Sophie a tray of tea and sandwiches, the door creaked open again, and there he was, Nathaniel Westbrook. He looked nothing like the photos Sophie had seen online. Gone was the clean-shaven man in suits and headlines. In his place stood someone taller than she expected, wearing a plain gray sweater and dark jeans. His face was tired, not just from lack of sleep, but from something deeper. Grief clung to him like an old coat he'd stopped trying to take off. "You're the new nanny," he said, his voice low and steady. Yes, she nodded, standing quickly and brushing the crumbs from her lap. Sophie. He studied her, not in a condescending way, but like he was trying to see if she could be trusted. Then, to her surprise, he said quietly, "Did Lily speak to you?" "Not exactly," Sophie admitted. "But she took my bunny eraser. I think that's a start." He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "She hasn't let anyone near her since Elise died. The last nanny left after a week." Sophie swallowed the lump in her throat. "I won't leave." Nathaniel's eyes met hers for the first time, and for a second the walls he had built so carefully around him cracked, just a little. He nodded again. "Good. Breakfast is at 8. Lily likes pancakes. Welcome to the house, Sophie." She didn't realize until he was gone that she'd been holding her breath. That night, Sophie lay in the small but cozy guest room, listening to the ticking of a clock she couldn't see. Somewhere down the hall, a father and daughter were grieving in silence, and she couldn't help but feel the weight of all that had been lost inside these walls. But something inside her whispered, "This is where you're meant to be." What she didn't know yet was that Lily wasn't the only one who needed healing, and love, once broken, has a way of finding its way back, in the quietest, most unexpected ways. The next morning, Sophie woke up before the alarm went off. The room was still dark, except for the soft glow from the hallway. She sat up, pulled her sweater tighter around her shoulders, and stared out the window. It had rained during the night. Now the world outside looked washed, clean but heavy, like it was starting over. She made her way to the kitchen where Maria was already preparing breakfast. The scent of pancakes filled the air. "Lily likes them shaped like animals," Maria said, flipping one with practiced ease. "I usually do bunnies or bears. She smiles sometimes when they look silly." "I'll remember that," Sophie said, tying her hair into a loose bun. "Anything else she likes?" "She draws a lot. Always with crayons, mostly her mom." Sophie nodded, her chest tightening again. "Does she talk about her?" Maria hesitated. "Not really, just draws her, and watches the front gate." Before Sophie could ask more, a small thump echoed from down the hall, the soft sound of bare feet against hardwood. Lily stood at the doorway in her pink pajamas, hair messy, holding her doll tight. "Good morning," Sophie said softly, crouching a little so she was eye level. Lily said nothing, but she walked slowly over and sat at the table. That alone was a win. Sophie placed a plate in front of her, pancakes shaped like little bunnies with blueberry eyes. Lily blinked at them, then reached for the syrup. Progress. They ate mostly in silence, with only the occasional clink of forks. Nathaniel didn't come down. Maria said he had early calls and worked late into the night. "He's like a ghost sometimes," she added, almost under her breath. After breakfast, Sophie and Lily headed to the playroom. Sophie took out a coloring book and spread it across the floor. "Want to show me your drawings?" Lily didn't answer, but she brought her own paper and crayons. Sophie didn't push. She just drew beside her. A crooked sun, a wonky dog, a house with a chimney that looked more like a rocket. Lily didn't laugh, but her eyes lingered on Sophie's silly sketches. Then Lily picked up a pink crayon and started drawing. A woman, with long brown hair, smiling, standing beside a girl. Sophie stayed quiet, just watched. Later that afternoon, while Lily napped, Sophie wandered outside. The garden behind the house was beautiful, untamed, but beautiful. Flowers had overgrown their beds. Vines crawled up the brick walls. It felt wild, real, honest. She found a wooden bench near the fountain and sat. "You're braver than most," a voice said behind her. She turned. Nathaniel stood there, hands in his pockets, gaze fixed on the fountain. "Most people tiptoe around her, around us." "I'm not most people," he gave a small smile. "No, I don't think you are." They sat in silence for a moment, the sound of water filling the space between them. "She hasn't smiled in a long time," he finally said, "but Maria said she reached for the syrup herself today." "She did." He looked down, then exhaled, like a weight had shifted slightly on his shoulders. "Elise used to call her sunshine," he said quietly, "because she lit up the whole room. Even now, I keep looking for that spark. I guess part of me hopes it'll come back." Sophie looked at him then, really looked at him. Beneath the layers of grief and fatigue, there was a man holding on with everything he had, to his daughter, to the past, to the pieces of his heart that hadn't shattered completely. "I think sometimes the spark doesn't disappear," she said softly. "It just waits. For the right moment, the right person." Their eyes met again. But before anything else could be said, a voice called out from the house. Small, tired. "Daddy?" Nathaniel was up in an instant. "Coming, sweetheart." Sophie watched him walk away, arms outstretched for his daughter, and felt something stir inside her. Something warm. Not romance, not yet, but maybe the start of something. That night, Sophie lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Her phone buzzed once. A message from her roommate back in the city. "How's the billionaire life?" She smiled, then typed back, "He's grieving, she's healing, and I think I'm supposed to be here." What she didn't write, what she couldn't quite put into words, was that she'd felt more seen in the last 24 hours than she had in years. Not just because someone looked at her, but because someone needed her. And that kind of connection, it changes you. But sometimes when you open your heart to someone else's pain, you risk exposing your own. And Sophie was about to discover that her past wasn't as far behind her as she thought. Sophie found herself falling into a rhythm. Every morning started with bunny-shaped pancakes, quiet glances from Lily, and long, careful walks in the garden. She stopped trying to make Lily talk, and that was when the girl started trying. Just little things, pointing, nodding. One morning, she whispered the word juice. Sophie nearly cried. Nathaniel, though, remained distant. He was polite, grateful even, but always guarded. They spoke in the hallways, shared short conversations in the garden, and every time she caught a glimpse of something warmer beneath the surface, he pulled it back behind his quiet eyes. But it was Lily who began to bloom. One afternoon, after a full hour of drawing beside Sophie on the playroom floor, she finally said a full sentence. "I liked your son better." Sophie stared at her, wide-eyed. You liked my crooked son?" Lily nodded, almost smiling. It was the first real sentence Lily had said in months. When Sophie told Nathaniel that evening, he didn't say anything at first, just ran a hand through his hair and turned to the window. His silence felt heavy. But then he said, without looking back, "Thank you for helping her find her voice again." "She's finding it on her own," Sophie said softly. "I'm just here." He turned to face her then, eyes a little shinier than before. "Sometimes being here is everything." That night, after Lily fell asleep curled up with her doll and her newest drawing, of Sophie no less, Maria handed Sophie a folded blanket and said, "You're doing more than you know." Sophie smiled, but there was something nagging at her. Something about Nathaniel that still didn't make sense. Later, while cleaning the playroom, she spotted a drawer slightly open in the corner cabinet. She wasn't trying to snoop, not really. But something about the way it stuck out felt off. Inside there were photos, mostly of Elise. One in particular caught Sophie's eye. It was a candid shot. Elise laughing, eyes crinkled, Lily sitting on her lap with cake on her cheeks. Nathaniel had his arm around them both. He looked so different in that photo. Relaxed. Happy. But what truly made Sophie's breath catch was the envelope behind the photos. It was unsealed. The paper inside was creased from being opened and refolded many times. She didn't read it. She couldn't. But she saw the handwriting on the front. To Lily, for when she's older. She closed the drawer gently, her heart thudding in her chest. Some grief never really ends. It just settles into corners of your life, waiting to be felt again. The next day, Sophie took Lily to the backyard garden and brought bubbles. It was the first time Sophie had heard her laugh, a real carefree giggle as the bubbles floated above her curls. Nathaniel stood by the window watching them, his expression unreadable. That night they ran into each other in the kitchen. "You stayed late with her," he said quietly, reaching for a glass of water. "She didn't want to go to bed," Sophie replied. "Said the moon looked lonely." Nathaniel smiled, not with his mouth but with his eyes. Elise used to say that. There it was again, that ache, that ghost between them. "I'm sorry," Sophie said, "if I ever overstep." He looked at her for a long moment. "You don't. You're the first person she's connected with since everything. You're not overstepping. You're helping." She looked down, unsure of how to respond. But then he asked unexpectedly, "Can I show you something?" Sophie followed him upstairs, past Lily's room, to a door at the very end of the hall. It creaked as he opened it. Inside was a room that hadn't been touched in years. Books, a half-painted canvas, a pair of slippers by the reading chair. "Elise's studio," he said. "I haven't been in here since the funeral." Sophie stepped inside slowly. The room smelled faintly of lavender and paint. She touched nothing, just looked. "She was an artist?" she asked gently. "Mostly as a hobby," he said. "But she was good, really good." There were drawings of Lily on the wall, and one unfinished piece, a pencil sketch of Nathaniel holding Lily on his shoulders, smiling. "I keep telling myself I'll finish it," he said, "but I don't think I ever will." Sophie turned to him. "Maybe it's not meant to be finished. Maybe it's meant to be remembered." He looked at her then, differently this time, with something softer, something almost unspoken. But before either of them could say more, a sound echoed from Lily's room, a soft cry. They both turned and rushed down the hall. When they opened the door, Lily was sitting up, sweating, tangled in her blankets. "Nightmare," she whispered, shaking. Sophie went to her instantly, wrapping her arms around her, stroking her back. "It's okay, baby girl. I'm here. You're safe." Nathaniel knelt beside them, brushing Lily's curls from her forehead. "Daddy's here too." Lily clung to both of them, one small hand gripping Sophie's shirt, the other wrapped around her father's. In that moment, they weren't a grieving family with a stranger in their house. They were something more, something that felt a lot like home. But just as Sophie started to feel herself sinking into that warmth, into the idea that she might finally belong somewhere, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. One new message. Unknown number. "We need to talk. It's about your mother." And just like that, the past Sophie had worked so hard to bury began knocking at her door. Sophie stared at the message for minutes before the words made sense. "We need to talk. It's about your mother." No name, no context, just a storm sent straight to her phone. She tried to shake it off, but even as she tucked Lily back into bed and turned off the lights, the message echoed in her chest like a warning bell. The past didn't just knock, it kicked the door down. Back in her room, she hesitated, then texted back, "Who is this?" Nothing, no reply. The typing bubble popped up once, then vanished. She tucked her phone under the pillow and lay awake for hours. The next morning, Sophie forced a smile as she walked into the kitchen. Lily was already there, sitting at the table, quietly coloring. Nathaniel stood by the counter, sipping his coffee. "Rough night?" he asked gently, noticing the dark circles under Sophie's eyes. "Just didn't sleep well," she said, brushing it off. He didn't push, but his eyes lingered a little longer than usual. Lily held up her drawing, 3 stick figures holding hands beneath a sun that actually looked pretty normal this time. Sophie blinked at it. "Is that us?" Lily nodded proudly. "It's me, you, and Daddy." Sophie felt something catch in her throat. Nathaniel smiled, a genuine one this time. "She's never drawn anyone with her since Elise." Lily grinned. "You make me feel happy again." The words were simple, innocent. But to Sophie they landed like thunder. She crouched beside Lily, brushing a curl from the little girl's cheek. "You make me feel happy too." The warmth of the moment was broken by a buzz in Sophie's pocket. Another message, unknown number. "We're not done. I have something you need to see." Nathaniel noticed her expression shift. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," she lied. "Just a friend being weird." He nodded slowly, but the crease in his brow said he didn't believe her. That afternoon, she took Lily to the park nearby. Just the two of them. Swings, ice cream, laughter. Sophie tried to stay present, but her phone buzzed again and again in her pocket, burning a hole in her peace. Finally, when Lily was busy building a little leaf house near the sandbox, Sophie stepped away and answered the latest message. "Come to 34 Willow Street. Tonight. Alone." She knew that address. It was an old cafe on the edge of town, closed down years ago. Why there? Why now? Sophie almost ignored it. Almost. But something told her this wasn't random. That this, whatever this was, mattered. Later that evening, after Lily was tucked in and Maria had gone home for the night, Sophie stood in the hallway staring at the front door. Nathaniel walked in from his office just as she grabbed her jacket. "Heading out?" he asked. "I won't be long," she said, trying to keep her voice light. He watched her for a second, then said carefully, "You don't owe me explanations. But if something's wrong, I hope you know you don't have to go through it alone." That nearly undid her, but she couldn't explain. Not yet. Not until she knew the truth. "Thank you," she whispered. "Really?" She stepped out into the cool night, not realizing Nathaniel watched her through the window until she was gone. Willow Street was darker than she remembered. The cafe's broken sign swung in the wind, creaking with every gust. Sophie approached slowly, her steps cautious, heart pounding. A figure stood near the side door, hooded, tall. She stopped a few feet away. "Who are you?" The man stepped into the light. Mid-40s. Tired eyes. Familiar. Somehow. "My name is Daniel," he said. "I was your mother's lawyer." Sophie froze. "What? Why are you—" "She's been gone for 2 years." "I know," he said, pulling out an envelope. "She asked me to give this to you after she passed, but I couldn't find you. You disappeared." I didn't want to be found," she whispered, taking the envelope. "I understand," he said. "But she wanted you to have this, and to know the truth." Sophie looked at the envelope. Her name, written in her mother's looping handwriting. Her chest tightened. "What truth?" Daniel hesitated. Then, softly, "Your mother knew Nathaniel." Sophie's world tilted. "What are you talking about?" "They met years ago, before he married Elise. It was brief, but real. She never told him about you, said he was already on a different path, that it would ruin his life." Sophie's blood went cold. "You're saying, Nathaniel—" "I don't know for sure," Daniel said. "But your mother believed he was your father. She never had the heart to tell either of you." Sophie stumbled back a step. "No, that can't be true." "I'm not saying you have to believe me," Daniel said. "But read the letter. She explains everything. I kept my promise to her. That's all I came to do." And just like that, he was gone, swallowed by the shadows of the street. Sophie stood there, frozen, the letter shaking in her hands. The world she had carefully built, this fragile sense of purpose and peace, suddenly felt like it had been built on sand. She walked back home slowly, the letter clutched tightly in her jacket pocket. She didn't read it. Not yet. She couldn't. But when she walked inside and saw Nathaniel sitting in the living room, reading one of Lily's books, his face relaxed, his body warm in the glow of the lamp, she felt like the air had been knocked from her lungs. What if it was true? What if the man she was slowly falling for was the one man she could never be with? And even worse, what if he had no idea? Sophie barely slept. The letter sat on her desk all night, untouched. She kept glancing at it like it might catch fire on its own. The weight of it, the possibility inside it, was almost unbearable. What if it changed everything? What if it didn't? By sunrise, the birds chirped as if the world was normal. But Sophie didn't feel normal. She felt like she was walking on a wire. One wrong step and everything below her would shatter. Lily's laughter pulled her back from her thoughts. Downstairs, the little girl ran through the hallway in socks, her arms stretched out like airplane wings. "Faster! Faster!" she giggled, as Nathaniel pretended to chase her with exaggerated stomps. Sophie paused in the doorway, watching them. Nathaniel scooped Lily up and spun her in the air. She squealed with joy, her curls flying. Then he set her down gently and said, "Go finish your drawing so Sophie can see it." Lily rushed off, leaving the two of them alone. Nathaniel turned to Sophie, slightly breathless. "She's having a good morning." "She's glowing," Sophie said with a quiet smile. "I've never seen her this free." "Neither have I." He looked at her, and for a moment, there was that same warmth in his gaze, a feeling that had grown between them like roots beneath the surface, unseen, but alive. Sophie opened her mouth. She wanted to tell him about the letter, the man in the alley, the impossible truth. But she froze. How could she say it? "Hey, there's a chance I might be your daughter. Also, I might be falling for you." No. She needed proof. She needed clarity. She needed time. So instead she said, "Do you mind if I take the afternoon off? Just a couple of hours." Nathaniel's brow furrowed. "Of course. Everything okay?" She nodded quickly. "Yeah, just something personal I need to take care of." He didn't push. "Maria can help with Lily if needed. Just be safe." Sophie sat alone in the cafe 2 towns over, somewhere no one would recognize her. The letter was still sealed. She stared at it for 10 full minutes before she finally tore it open. Her mother's handwriting poured across the page, graceful and familiar. "My sweet Sophie, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and I'm sorry for so many things. There's a truth I carried all your life, one I never knew how to say. Nathaniel Westbrook. He might be your father. I met him before he became who he is now. He was kind, a dreamer, but we weren't meant to last. We had one perfect night. A goodbye. I never told him about you. I didn't want to interfere with his life, especially when I found out he'd met someone else. Maybe I was selfish. Maybe I was scared. But you deserved more. And he deserved to know. If you ever find yourself near him, tell him. Or don't. I trust your heart. Whatever you decide, know this. You are not a mistake. You are the greatest thing I've ever done. With all my love, Mom." Sophie wiped her cheeks, not even realizing she'd been crying. The pain wasn't sharp, it was deep, like a root had been pulled from her chest. She folded the letter, slid it into her bag, and sat there for a long time, watching the people around her live lives that felt simpler than her own. She couldn't keep this secret forever. But if she told Nathaniel now, it could ruin everything. Especially now that Lily trusted her, loved her, and Nathaniel. God, she was starting to feel it too. The way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, the way his voice softened around her, there was something there. But if this letter was true, then none of it could ever happen. When Sophie returned to the house that evening, the sky was already painted in soft orange and pink. The lights were on inside. She opened the door quietly and heard laughter echoing from the living room. Lily was playing with Nathaniel on the floor, building a Lego castle. When she saw Sophie, she jumped up. "Sophie, look what we made!" Sophie knelt beside her. "That's amazing! You even added a drawbridge!" Nathaniel smiled. She insisted. "Because princesses need to be able to leave the castle too," Lily said proudly. Sophie laughed. Smart girl. Nathaniel's eyes met hers, and something passed between them again. Something careful and aching. Later, after Lily fell asleep and Maria had gone home, Nathaniel offered Sophie a glass of wine. They sat outside in the garden, under the stars. Silence settled between them like a blanket. Not awkward, but honest. She talks about you all the time now, he said softly. She calls you her favorite. Sophie smiled, her fingers around the stem of the glass. She's mine too. Nathaniel looked at her, eyes flickering with something he wasn't sure he should say. I don't think I've thanked you properly, for everything. For helping her. For helping me. You don't have to, she said. I want to, he replied. I mean it. You've brought something back into this house I thought was gone forever. Hope. Warmth. Maybe even love. He reached for her hand without even realizing it. Their fingers touched, and Sophie froze. She wanted to lean into it. So badly. But then she saw the envelope in her mind again. Her mother's words. You are not a mistake. She pulled her hand away gently. I should get some sleep. Nathaniel blinked, a little confused. Of course. Good night. Sophie walked inside, heart pounding, the wine untouched. In her room, she pulled out the letter again. She knew what she had to do. She couldn't stay in that house another day without telling him the truth. Tomorrow. Everything would change. Sophie stood outside Nathaniel's office door, the letter clutched tight in her hand. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it. Every step toward this moment had felt inevitable, but now that it was here, she wanted to turn back. To pretend she hadn't read the letter. To pretend her mother's truth hadn't cracked her world in half. But pretending wouldn't protect anyone. It would only delay the fallout. She raised her hand to knock. Daddy! Lily's voice rang from down the hall. The door opened before Sophie could move, and Nathaniel stepped out. He looked surprised to see her there, then softened. Hey, everything okay? Sophie hesitated. Can we talk? Alone? His brow furrowed, but he nodded and stepped back into the office, motioning her in. It was the first time she'd really been inside. Books lined the shelves, papers scattered across the desk. But there was also a framed drawing Lily had done, and beside it, a photo of Elise holding Lily in her arms. Sophie sat on the edge of the chair. Her hands trembled slightly as she unfolded the letter. I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me finish before you say anything. Nathaniel watched her carefully. All right. She took a breath so deep it hurt. I got a message from someone claiming to be my mother's lawyer, she began. He gave me this letter. From her. She wrote it before she died, but asked him to wait until I was ready. Nathaniel stayed silent, his posture slowly shifting. Listening. Waiting. She told me something I didn't expect, something I never imagined, Sophie said, her voice starting to crack. She said she knew you, that you and she had a brief relationship, years before you met Elise. Nathaniel's eyes flickered, confusion, recognition, then stillness. She said you might be my father. The words hung in the air like a blade between them. Nathaniel didn't speak, didn't move. Sophie pressed on. She never told you. She didn't want to interfere in your life. I didn't know, I swear. I found out only a couple of days ago. He looked down at the letter she held out, but didn't take it. I don't expect anything, Sophie whispered. Not answers, not acceptance, not anything. But I couldn't stay here, in this house, getting close to you, to Lily, without telling you the truth. Nathaniel slowly stood, walking to the window. His hands were clenched. I remember her, he said quietly. We met at a design conference in Seattle. She was unlike anyone I'd ever met. We stayed up talking all night. Then, that was it. I never saw her again. He turned back to Sophie. His voice was steadier now, but his eyes, they were torn open. You're saying all this time I had a daughter I never knew about? I'm saying it's possible, Sophie said. She believed it. But I haven't taken any tests, and I didn't come here to throw your life off balance. I took the nanny job because I needed it. I didn't even know who you were until afterward. Nathaniel sat down across from her slowly. His voice was low. Why tell me now? Because I couldn't live with hiding it, she said, especially now that I care. Care? She looked away, eyes burning. About Lily, about this family, about you. The silence that followed was unbearable. Then he said, Do you want to take a test? Sophie blinked. What? A DNA test, he said quietly. If this is true, we deserve to know, and so does Lily. She nodded, stunned. But, Nathaniel added, until we do, I need space. It hit like a punch to the stomach, but she understood. Of course. He stood again, rubbing the back of his neck. You've been incredible with Lily. I don't want her to lose you, but I need time to figure this out, to feel it. Sophie stood too, the air heavy between them. I'll stay at a friend's tonight, just for now. He nodded slowly. Thank you, for being honest. She walked to the door. Before stepping out, she turned back. I didn't plan any of this, Nathaniel, but I meant everything I said. He didn't answer, and when Sophie left the room, she felt like her heart stayed behind, sitting on that chair, still hoping for something she couldn't name. That night, Sophie lay on her old roommate's couch, staring at the ceiling. The room was cold, the cushions stiff, but it wasn't the furniture that made her feel out of place. It was the emptiness. She missed Lily's tiny laugh, the way she'd started to hold Sophie's hand without thinking, the way she whispered stay at bedtime. She missed Nathaniel's quiet presence, his strength, the gentleness he tried so hard to hide. The feeling she'd started to believe was more than comfort. It hurt more than it should have. And that's how she knew. She wasn't just afraid of losing the job. She was afraid of losing them. Back at the Westbrook home, Nathaniel stood in the dark hallway outside Lily's room. She was asleep, curled beneath the blanket, the drawing of Sophie still taped to her headboard. He leaned against the wall and stared at the ceiling, the letter from Sophie in his hand. Could it be true? Could the woman who helped bring his daughter back to life actually be his daughter? And if she wasn't, if the letter was wrong, then why did his heart ache like it was already broken? Everything was unraveling, and the truth was coming for all of them. It rained the day the DNA test came back. Sophie sat in a quiet corner of a bookstore cafe, the envelope resting untouched on the table, just like her untouched tea. Her fingers trembled slightly as she picked it up. So much depended on the thin piece of paper inside. A yes would mean a line she could never uncross. A no would mean everything she had felt over the past few weeks. Every moment with Lily, every look from Nathaniel hadn't been wrong. It would mean her heart was safe, but it would also mean she wasn't his daughter. She opened the envelope, read the words, then slowly let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Not a biological match. Her eyes filled with tears, not from sadness, from relief, from confusion, from the kind of emotional release that hits when every possibility has lived in your mind for too long. She wasn't his daughter, but she had still found something inside that house that felt like family, and now, maybe, she could hold on to it. Sophie returned to the mansion just as the rain lightened into a mist. The driveway was slick, the trees dripping. Maria opened the door before she could even knock. He's home and waiting. Sophie stepped into the house, her heart thudding in her chest. The walls looked different now. Warmer, not because the lighting had changed, but because of what they'd all shared here. Nathaniel stood in the living room near the fireplace, holding the same letter Sophie had given him days ago. Their eyes met. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then Sophie said, softly, I got the results. His jaw tensed. And, she stepped closer, it's not true. I'm not your daughter. His eyes closed. not from disappointment, but from sheer emotional weight lifting off his shoulders. He looked up at her again, and this time there was no hesitation. Just him and her, in the silence of the room where everything began. "I didn't know what I wanted the answer to be," he admitted, "but when you left, the house felt wrong. Lily kept asking where you were. I didn't know what to tell her." "I didn't know what to tell myself," Sophie said quietly. "I thought that maybe if I stayed away long enough, I'd forget how it felt to be here, how it felt to feel needed." He stepped closer. "You were more than needed, Sophie." She swallowed. "I thought I might lose you. Both of you." Nathaniel's voice dropped into a whisper. "You were never losing us." She looked at him, really looked, and saw it all there. The grief, the love, the hope. He reached for her hand. "I don't know how to do this," he said honestly. "I'm still healing, still figuring things out. But I know I want you in Lily's life, and in mine, however you'll let us." Sophie blinked through tears. "I don't need perfect. I just need real." And that was what he gave her. Nathaniel stepped forward and kissed her. Not rushed, not uncertain. Just two people finding something they thought they'd lost forever. When they pulled apart, Lily stood at the edge of the room, sleepy-eyed, holding her drawing pad. Sophie knelt. "Hey, sunshine, I missed you." Lily ran into her arms without a word, hugging her tightly, then held out her newest drawing. 3 people. Again. But this time she'd added a heart in the middle. "Family," Lily said. Nathaniel crouched beside them and wrapped both of them into his arms. In that moment, no one needed answers. No one needed definitions. They only needed each other. Weeks passed. The garden bloomed again. Lily laughed more, talked more, and even started school. Sophie stayed, officially now no longer a nanny but part of the family. Nathaniel reopened Elise's studio, not to erase the past, but to honor it, to make space for new beginnings. One evening, Sophie sat beside him under the stars, Lily already asleep upstairs. Nathaniel handed her a small velvet box. Her breath caught. Inside was not a ring, not yet, but a locket. Inside the locket, a tiny sketch Lily had drawn. A family beneath a sun. She said, "You're her sunshine," he said softly. "She's not wrong." Sophie held the locket close. "You're both my light too." They stayed like that for a while. No need for promises or perfect endings, just the kind of love that's born from pain, grown in trust, and healed in truth. Months later, Sophie stood in front of a small group of kids, volunteering at a local center for children who'd lost parents. Lily sat beside her, drawing in her lap. Nathaniel watched from the doorway, proud, peaceful. Sophie smiled and told the kids, "Sometimes, life doesn't give us the family we expect, but it always gives us chances, little windows, to choose love, to choose healing. And when we do, something beautiful happens." She looked at Lily, then at Nathaniel. They had all chosen love, even when it was the harder thing to do. The end. What about you? Have you ever loved someone you weren't sure you were allowed to? Or found family in an unexpected place? Share your story. I'd really love to read it.